Hi everyone, and welcome to my session at the Excel and Power BI Summit, where we're going to take a look at some of the data manipulation techniques you can use within Excel. My name's Helen Jones and I am part of the Collab 365 team. So I have helped put together all of the previous summits as well as this one. But of all of the summits we've done so far, this one is by far the one I'm most excited about because I have loved using Excel for over 28 years now. I also use it pretty much on a daily basis, and I've been known to create Excel spreadsheets for so many non-normal tasks like moving house and Christmas present lists and all sorts of things that, so not just in my professional capacity, I also use Excel just to help me in organising normal daily tasks. So I absolutely love Excel, and I am super excited to be watching and taking part in some of the sessions coming up to see what else I can learn and what else I can use Excel for. However, in this session, we are going to review and take a look at sort, find, pivot tables, filter, and data grouping options within Excel. So without any more delay, let's get started. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at is sorting data. And you can see in my spreadsheet here, I've got a very simple table with 3 columns of information. We've got somebody's name, we've got the favourite pet that they've got, and also a column showing how many of those pets that they actually own. So to sort these, the first thing you need to do when sorting data in Excel is firstly highlight the entire range that you want to sort. So we need to click and drag to cover those 3 columns and go all the way down to the bottom of the data like this. So we'll get there in a minute. Okay, so you can click and drag. That's one way of doing that, and we'll just accept that there. And then we'll go back to the top. And then in the ribbon at the top here, there's an option to sort and filter. So we'll just do a basic sort to start off with. So firstly, Excel's you've got a few options here, and it's going to guess what you might want to do. So let's try sorting A to Z first. There we go, simple click, and the data has immediately all changed, and the person's names are all now displayed alphabetically, which is brilliant. Okay, so if we've still got that same range highlighted, we can also sort them alphabetically, but from Z through to A. So the alternate, so we can do it upside down, and there we go. Again, simple click, and it's automatically all rejiggled. Now you might want to do a custom sort, for example, and that gives you more options, as it says here. So you can choose more options with multiple columns or different kind of sort. So let's have a little look at these options as well. So if we click on that first, a pop-up window is going to arrive. And this is where we can determine exactly what we want to sort by. So the first thing to look at is this checkbox here, and to say whether your data has headers or not. And if you say that your data has headers, then it will ignore this first row in that highlighted area that we had. So if I untick this, you'll see that the actual range goes back to include that row. And if we left it like this, it would sort name, favourite pet, and how many into the data based on whatever sort options we're going to use. So it's important to have this chosen and check the box whether you've got the data having headers or not, as shown here. Okay, so our first level of sort currently is by name, but let's try something a little bit different. So instead of having that, we can try and sort the pets by cell values, and we'll go alphabetically. But then we'll introduce a new level. So we'll have a new level, and our secondary sort will be the person who has the most number of those pets. So we'll then have, again, cell values, and we'll go for the second layer, largest to smallest, and click OK. So what this has done has rejiggled everything. So we've got birds are the first pets alphabetically, and Darren at the top here has got 2 of those. So the largest number of birds belongs to Darren. Then the next sort level is cats, and we have got 2 people that each have 3 cats, then 2 cats and 1 cat. So you can see it's sorted firstly by the pet alphabetically, and then secondary within that level that shows the person with the highest number of pets. So that's really quite useful if you've got multiple searches, and you can do that for various different levels and as many levels as you like. You can just keep clicking here, custom sort, and then add more levels until you've got the sort working exactly as you want it, for example. Okay, so let's also have a look here. So numerically by the largest number of pet zones. We can go back to the first layer. We can go back to sort and filter and custom sort. And if we want to change this, so perhaps we want to have the sort just by the largest number of pet zones. We don't want this layer anymore. What we can do on this level here is delete that level. That will disappear. And now we're going to sort by the number of pets that people own. So let's see what happens now. And there we go. So we can see that people with the largest number of individual pets are people with fish generally, and they've got obviously large tanks with lots of lovely little fish swimming around. So that's how we can do a variety of different sorts. Now, one thing that's really useful to make sure when you're sorting data you don't lose anything, and make sure that you actually do sort the entire list. Obviously the first thing to check is that you highlight the entire row. If you actually only highlight some of this and then do sort and filter, for example, let's just go A to Z, it's only going to sort the people that you've highlighted. So everybody else below Peter and down here remained the same, and this top section has just been resorted. So it's very easy, if you're not careful, to sort of get your data a little bit muddled up and not sort everything. The other thing to note is if you only highlight the first row, okay, there we go, and sort those. Now what it's going to do is Excel has spotted that you're only sorting one column within what's a table of 3 columns. So it's just going to check that you're doing what you actually intend to do. So we've got a statement here. So there's more data next to the selection. Okay, we've not selected it, so it's warning us that it won't be sorted. So we've got 2 options really. We can either expand the selection and that will then include all this other information in our sort, or continue with the current selection. So let's just do that for now, and we'll sort everybody alphabetically. So you can see there that only that column A changed and the data in columns B and C remained the same. So we've now mismatched our owner's name to the actual details of pets, which isn't what we want to do. But fear not, at this point, the option of Control Z to undo what you've just done is always very handy. So it's worthwhile checking at every step when you're manipulating data that you've still got certain key bits of information. It's all still in sync with one another and you haven't messed it up at all. So a couple of clever options to do that are to put in some check totals effectively. So good check totals are a count, so to count the number of rows that you've got. And to do that, you can use the @count function. So I'll type that in now. And you can see here we've got a lot of different styles of count options. So Excel is going to guess what you're going to do, and we can count cells with numbers in them. Count A though is the one we want here because these are going to count things with alphabetical items in them. So we'll go count A, and then we need to tell Excel the range that we want to count. So we're going to miss the header and we're going to count the number of people we've got in our survey. So zoom down here. There we go, Jessica was at the bottom. Close the brackets, hit enter, and we should have 162 different people in our survey. So if we copy this, okay, if we copy that over into a column that contains numerical cells, it is going to count again the number of items that we have, not necessarily the actual total of those items. So really what we want to do here is, instead of counting the different entries that we've got in that column, we really want to sum the total. So in total, we've got 470 pets in our survey. So now if we go back and have a look at these and resort these, no matter what we do to our information, our check totals should still remain the same as long as we haven't lost information along the way. And that's quite a useful little technique to make sure that you keep all the data intact and you haven't lost bits as you go. So if you can, keep those numbers in mind, because as we go through the rest of the presentation, you'll see that time and time again, when I do different things with the data, we're going to come back to those check totals of 162 and 470. Okay, so that's all about sorting. Okay, so let's move on and take a look at the find options. So I'm still going to use the same data that we've had before. So we've got the people's names, pets, and the number of pets they have. But we're just going to try and find some information within this list. So rather than sort it, we are going to use this find and select option in the ribbon again. So let's click on the down arrow here and see what happens. So we're going to click and use the find option. So we're going to search for certain text in here. So you can see here our first challenge is to try and find the pet that Susan owns. So we'll type the name Susan into this find box and then click find next. So the first time it then highlights the cell in which it's found the word Susan. So we can see here it's row 33 in column A. So it's the name Susan in there. And you notice that it doesn't matter about being case sensitive. So I've typed it in with lowercase s initially, but it still found the capital S version there. So if I click find next, then obviously the next time it finds the name Susan is in the sentence that I've put here. So our question here, what pet Susan owns. So click again and it's just going to take me round. So it will just keep finding those options in the spreadsheet that you're in. So you don't have to highlight ranges. You can literally just look for something in the spreadsheet that you have open at the time. So we can see here that Susan owns a bird and she has just one of them. If you like using keyboard shortcuts, then you'll find that Control and the letter F, when used together, will also bring up that find and replace little window to help you find things. So that's a useful alternate to know about them. Okay, so other options we can do here, we can find items using the find tab here, but we also have a replace option. So let's have a look at replace, and let's just imagine for a moment that actually we've found out that the lady's name isn't Susan, it's Suzanne. So we want to find the word Susan and replace it with the correct spelling of her name. So I'll type that in now. Okay, so it's Suzanne, and if we can find them, but really what we want to do is replace. So you can click replace all, and that will replace both of them at once. So it tells you here that we've made 2 replacements, and you can see Suzanne is now spelt correctly in the sentence and the question there, and also in our data table it's been updated. So we'll OK and close that, and then we'll Control Z to undo that, and we'll try again with some other options. So Susan is back to Susan, and we'll do something different. So we can find and replace. So what we did first was replace all. If you wanted to replace them individually, it might not be every version of Susan that you want to replace. We can replace the one that's highlighted, which you can see here has replaced that one that was highlighted in the table, but at the moment Susan here hasn't been replaced, and then we can replace that individually as well. So you can do them one by one or all in one go if that's what you want to do, which is quite useful. Okay, so back to our other question, let's try and find out who owns a tortoise. So rather than looking for the word Susan, we want to look for tortoise. So let's find in our spreadsheet tortoise. So we can see here that Matt has got a tortoise. Jessica has a tortoise. And I think there's one more. There's obviously the word tortoise in our sentence, but also Raphael has a tortoise. Now, because we started on the row with Suzanne in, Excel will just go down from there. So it found the Matt's was the first one it found, and he was lower down in the list. So just be aware when you're using this, the find feature, you might need to click the find next option to make sure that you've found all of the individual instances of that, the thing that you're looking for, because it may be higher up the spreadsheet than the place where you're starting. So it's always useful to almost go round in a circle to make sure you don't miss anything. So we click find next, there's maps again, Jessica, the word tortoise in the question, and finally Raphael. So we can clearly just double check again. It's worthwhile going round that circle 2 or 3 times just to make sure you have picked out specifically all the instances of the thing you're looking for. Obviously, another way of finding who owns a tortoise would be to do what we did a moment ago and use the sort function to sort all of the pets alphabetically, and then all the tortoises would be grouped together. So that's finding and replacing information. Okay, so we're going to move on now and take a look at pivot tables. And pivot tables are a really, really useful way of summarising information. And initially we're going to try and illustrate that by creating a pivot table to find out who has the most popular name. So pivot tables can be found in the Insert menu. So we click Insert, and then here we go. So pivot table is one of these options, and like the description says here, it can help you easily arrange and summarize complex data in a pivot table. So obviously our data isn't terribly complicated, but hopefully it will illustrate the point and the purpose of pivot tables quite nicely for you all. Okay, so we're going to insert a pivot table. So we can just click on this, and Excel again intuitively guesses what it is you're trying to use as data for the pivot table, and it is highlighted here. It shows by having the dashed moving line all the way around our data that it's the whole of our 3 columns and all of the people with pets. So we can just prove that that's what it's done. Scroll down to the bottom of the spreadsheet. Keep going, keep going, keep going, and there we go. So at the bottom we've got Tara with a cat. So let's go back to the top here. So it's guessed that we want to use all of the data, which makes perfect sense in this instance. So it's selected our table. Now if it hadn't quite got that right, you could click in the box here and choose a different range. So you can then drag the cursor over the actual range you want to use, but for us this is perfect. You can use external data sources, but I'm not going to do that in this session here. We're just going to keep it simple. And we want our pivot table to be placed. We've got 2 options really here, either in a new worksheet or on our existing worksheet. So if you chose a new worksheet, it would insert an entirely new tab in the workbook for you to keep that data in. But we're going to use the existing worksheet on this sheet, and location, we'll just plonk it right next to our initial data table here. So let's click OK and see what happens. Okay, so this is going to be the area that our pivot table appears in, and the fields that we can use are shown over here. So this has summarised. We've got the 3 options, the person's name, the pet and how many they've got. And then we've got 4 options down here below as to where we're going to put the data and how it's going to be summarised in our pivot table. So initially, our challenge is to find out about popular names of people. So we're going to drag the name, and you can just click and drag into wherever you want this to go. And we're going to put that in the row because we want people's names going down one side. Next, we need to find out how many of those names are in our table. So we can use name again and put that in values. So that is going to count how many of those names we have in our table. And initially, that's all we want to do. So as soon as we've dragged those fields into these options below in the pivot table, our pivot table has automatically generated. So let's just go down and have a look at what we've got. we've got lots and lots of different unique names with the grand total of 162. So if you remember from our first sort exercise, when we'd had a check total, 162 was the total number of names that we had in our list. So that's useful to know, because we now know, whilst performing a different function on the same data, we still have 162 items in our list. We haven't lost anything along the way. Okay, so we've still got everything in there. So our specific challenge though is to find out which is the most popular name, and there are several ways of doing that. However, I'm going to use the auto sum feature and look for the maximum number that appears in our counted name list. So we'll click and drag across all of these. There we go, hit enter, and we have 5. So the maximum number in this list is going to be number 5. So then we can just look for it. So you can obviously just eyeball through the list, or we can go back and use that find option that we used earlier. So we can find the number 5 and in this highlighted range that we've got. So click find, and there we have. So at the moment, Michael has got 5 instances in our list. So let's click find again. Find next, just to double check that Michael is actually the only name in our list with 5 instances. So the most popular name is Michael. Okay. So our next pivot table challenge is to try and find out, using the same data, which is the most popular pet. So if we again insert a pivot table and use the same data again, and also create the pivot table in the same area on the spreadsheet, and click OK. So again, we get the pivot table space here and our fields that we can use over on the right hand side. This time though, we want to find out what is the favourite pet and how many of those pets we have. So we're going to use the favourite pet option in the row heading, and that's already summarised information far greater than when we did the same thing by the name of the owner. And instead of using the same data again and counting, we are going to bring that how many value into the values option. And at this point, Excel is going to suggest that we're going to sum up and add up how many, which is really clever because that's exactly what we want to do. So it's immediately added up the number of individual pets that our surveyed people have got. And again, the grand total of 470 shows that we haven't lost any data along the way. So we can see here how many different pets we've got. But to specifically answer the question that we were trying to find out in the first place, we can clearly see that fish are the most popular pet, as we have got 276 different fish in our survey. Now, you're not just restricted to counting different numbers of items in pivot tables, other options are available as well. And it's quite interesting to look at the different values that you can do in this field here. So we can use the sum of how many we've got, but you can also click on the down arrow and look at the value field settings. And this allows you to look for different ways of summarizing the data. So we can sum them, add them all up, we can count how many. So let's have a look there, and we then know how many different people have got those different pets. We can do the same again and look for the average number of pets, and that will give us a peculiar set of numbers, but that will be the average if we work that out. The maximum, okay, so the maximum number of items for each individual pet, and also let's have a little look at the minimum. Okay, so obviously most of them have got a minimum number of 1, but really we were looking at the sum of, so we'll just put that back to sum. So it's really useful. Pivot tables can take the same data that you've got and very easily add different or work out different numbers. if you wanted to display some of those different values all at once, you can just add extra columns in and information. So we could use our how many option in values, put it in twice, and use a change one of those to the count, and we just expand the pivot table to see how many people have got snakes, etc. And so we've got 11 people that have got snakes, and between them they've got 12 snakes. So it's really easy to expand and use those and use the pivot tables and manipulate them to change the data to give you precisely what you need from one actual basic data source. So let's move on now and take a look at some of the filtering options within Excel. So we're back with our lovely list of pets and owners, and we have got 3 columns of information again, and we're going to use these titles of our fields to actually filter some information. So our challenge is to try and filter the data to find out who owns at least 2 dogs. And we can insert a filter by clicking on the row that we want that contains headings that we're going to filter on, and going to the filter options here and click filter. And that's going to put these little drop down arrows against each of the different fields of data that we have in our spreadsheet. So initially, all we need to do is we can click on the down arrow to see all of the different options that are available in our list. And to start with, they are all selected. So are we interested in dogs? So you can click in the select all to deselect all, and then just click our dog option and click OK, and that will literally just filter out. And you can see here there are lots of, all the rows still exist, but at the moment we have they're hidden from our view because we are only picking the rows that has a dog in them. But the challenge was to find out who owns at least 2 dogs, so we can also add another filter on our how many field. So we'll click the down option there. Again, we've got select all chosen to start off with, but we want to know how many own at least 2 dogs. So really the only option that we don't want here is for 1 dog. So we can just deselect that, leaving 2 and 3 selected, click OK, and again it will narrow down our list just to find those people who have got at least 2 dogs. Now, one of the interesting things now is if we click and highlight this range and copy, it will copy just these items that we've got. So if we go and paste them over here, you can then just extract that information from the whole table and only just show those ones that have met the criteria further below. Everything else has been ignored at this point, which can be quite useful. So let's have a look at those filter options again and maybe change a few little bits. So we've got, we'll select all numbers of animals again, and then also all different animals. And let's change this to look for people who have got quite large numbers of pets. So we will just remove some of these fewer numbers and anybody that has more than 10 pets. And rather than just go greater than 10, it already knows there are only a few options in that number range. So we just click OK, and it will change to show how many people have got pets in that magnitude. And there we've got the names of all the people and fish. So again, we can just quickly copy that information, and then if we paste it below the dog area, again it will just pick out all those ones that meet the filtered criteria, and you can then copy and paste that into a different area to do other things with if you wish. So next we're going to take a little look at some of the grouping and subtotal options that you can do with data. So we're back to our original list again, but first I want to actually have this data sorted before I do anything else. So I'm going to sort with a custom sort, and I want to group all of the favourite pets together and list them alphabetically. So we'll just get that done first. Okay, so now I've got that group. What I want to do is add groups to this data so it will subtotal. And we can do that by going into the data ribbon. And here we have some options for grouping and ungrouping and subtotaling information. So we're going to start by highlighting all of the data. So we've highlighted our data range, and then we are going to use the subtotal option. Now at this point we can add subtotals at a variety of different places. So this is suggesting that at each change in our favourite pet, we're going to use the sum total and add the subtotal to the how many option. So if we click OK for that, right, what you can see that it's done is at the end of the section that says that holds all the people that have birds, it then puts a total for birds in, and there's a little indication here that is all one section. If we scroll down, we can see all the cats together, and there's a cat total, and each of our different pets has a total. Now we can summarize that by clicking the little minus options here, and that zips up the data, as you can see, and I'm working through the whole list to give us those totals that we've had before when we did our pivot table. But the difference is with a pivot table, it summarizes it and literally only gives you this information. The benefits of using a subtotal option are that if you then want to find out who has hamsters, you can just click on the plus to expand that option, and you can then see all of the individual bits of information that totals that makes up that total. And you can do that for any of these ones that we've got. So it's quite easy. Once you've got the information sorted, you can then add subtotals to just summarize the data and zip it up a little bit so it's displayed more compactly, but with all the information that it's based on just hidden behind a little bit. So let's just zip all of these up, and I will show you another interesting thing. So if you remember, our grand total of our pets is 470, and we've kept coming back to that number throughout the variety of different things that we've done in this session. So we know that's definitely the correct check total to be working back to. Now, if we just sort of forget where we are with these subtotals and just insert a basic sum to add up all of the pets within our range and hit enter, at this point you could get quite confused by that answer. So 1410 individual pets, and that's clearly not the right number. We know the total is 470, and what's happened here is, because each individual pet, there are 470 pets in the original list, the summaries have added subtotals at each individual pet level. So for example here, let's go back to tortoise. We've got 4 tortoises, which are there individually. We then already have the tortoise total of 4, so effectively if you add all the numbers up, we've counted those twice. And then our grand total totals all of the totals higher up the spreadsheet, so we have all of the items counted 3 times. So just to prove that, if we take that total number here and divide by 3, there you have it. So our total, if you just sum them up, it's literally counting everything 3 times. There's the initial person with the number of pets they have, then the subtotal ordered by pet, and then also the grand total at the bottom. So we have our data counted 3 times if we're not careful and put in a sum to just add all those numbers up. So again, it's really useful to have these check totals and to be very familiar with the data that you've got and the data that you're manipulating to make sure that you don't sort of go off track somewhere along the line and just get very confused and start reporting incorrect data. So that covers the 5 main things that we were going to look at today, but we still have quite a lot of time left. So I thought we'll take a look at some of the places that you can actually get your data from to then use within Excel. And in this example here, going back to my lovely people, pets, and how many of them they've got information, I thought I'll just share exactly how I got that information in the first place. Essentially, I started with a CSV file, and that just stands for comma separated values. And you can see here in my list, it's in this CSV file, the titles included, name, favourite pet and how many, and each of those bits of information are separated literally just by a comma. And it's the data file is just literally a list of all the different items that we have. So often when you're working with Excel, you might want to import data from other CSV files and other data sources. So this will just go through how to do that, even with sort of my basic information that we're starting with, but you'll see the process on how to bring it into Excel. So that's my basic data. We've got that lovely long list of people with pets, so let's close that down for now. And in my Excel spreadsheet, in the data area here, we have got a section here in the ribbon showing how to get and transform data. So the one that's going to help us in this specific example is from text or CSV, and this is where we can import the data that I've got. So if we click on this button, then we're going to have to find the information that we want, and this is my pet data CSV file. So we'll select that and import. Excel's going to think about it, and then it gives us an import option. So it's found the data, and these items at the top are what we need to look at first. So it's given us an example of how the data will look as well. So what it's thinking is, because it's a comma separated file, it's assuming that where the commas are in my data, that's where it needs to break the data up and put it into a different column. So you can see here we've got the name, the pet, and then how many that each person owns. But if we change some of these just to see what happens, and if we pick a different limiting factor to chop that data up, so for example, we'll take a space and see what happens. So if your data is broken up but with spaces in between it, then this is how you can pull it into Excel. Now what it's done for me though is, in our titles row, we've got the name, comma, favourite, because a space doesn't exist in that string of characters. Then because there's a space between the words favourite and pet, the word pet has been put automatically into column 2 with the comma, then the word how, and because in the phrase how many, in that part of my title I have a space in between there, it's broken those up into other columns as well. So it's going to put the data name favourite space, pet how space, and then many in the third columns. But of course all my data below that doesn't contain any spaces, it's separated by commas. So it's putting all of the information into the first column because it can't find any spaces included to break that up. So if you'd got different data with other keystrokes or things in between the key bits of data, you could import them and use colons, for example. It's not going to find any colons in any of my data set, so it's just going to lump everything into column 1. And again, equal sign, it's not going to find any of those in my data, so again it would just be pulled into column 2. So you can choose the thing that's breaking the data up based on the actual information you have in your text file, which of course for us is a comma with my example. So there we've got a nicely structured name in one column, pet in the middle column, and then how many in the third column. And once you've decided, and worked out that how you want your data to be displayed, all you need to do is then click the load option and let Excel work its magic. And hey presto, there is all my information as it was, and it's loaded. Now in this particular example, it's put it into and created a table with alternating highlighted rows and also filter options that we were looking at earlier. So we can immediately start using this data and finding people with large numbers of pets and using the filters already. So it's really quite clever in the way that it pulls all the data through for us into the spreadsheet. So that's how I got my data effectively. So let's just go to a blank page and just have another look at some of the other data options. So all these data options are held in the data menu within the ribbon. And we can do the same kind of thing using getting data from different sources to then pull it into Excel using the same kind of style of breaking the data up into sensible columns from a variety of sources. We can get data here from the text and CSV files that I've shown you. You can pull data from a web page, from tables in other areas in either other Excel spreadsheets or other places, and other connections that you might have with other common sources that you use within your organization. So there we have it. You can get data into your Excel spreadsheet, and hopefully I've given you an indication and some examples of how you can then manipulate that data in a variety of different ways. And I'd encourage you to have a play with some of these techniques, and hopefully you've seen that you don't need to have a massive amount of data to be able to just play with it a little bit in Excel and see what you can do and how you can use that data and summarize it in different ways. So there we have it. This session has been an introduction to data manipulation techniques in Excel. And just to recap, we've looked at sort, filter, find and group options within Excel. We've also taken a look at pivot tables and how to import data from other sources, including CSV files, into Excel. So I hope you found that a really useful session. The sessions stay with us as you go through this conference. We've got loads more lined up with more detailed and more involved sessions on all things Excel and Power BI. So stay with us. It's a progression through the next few days. There's absolutely tons more to learn. I use Excel all the time, but I don't do that many sort of exciting and different things with it. So I'm super excited to watch some of the sessions that are coming up. They're really going to catch my interest. I'm hoping to learn loads more. So hope you can stay with us throughout the next couple of days. So my name's Helen Jones. That was my session. Don't forget, you can also buy the all access pass to these sessions from this summit. The pass includes all session recordings from the Excel and Power BI Summit, so everything that we're showing you over these 3 days. It'll include 10 ebooks, which are ebooks written up from some of the summit sessions. You get a $50 microjobs voucher plus the Excel training nuggets video. So that's a series of 12 nugget videos, really useful, simple and short videos you can download into your environment and use within your organization to help train other people on Excel as well. So thanks so much for watching. I hope you've really enjoyed it. Take care and stay tuned for more exciting sessions. Thanks very much. Bye for now.